Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes.
I think it looks like the waiting room is slowing down, so we can go ahead and get started. I'll keep an eye out though for stragglers.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. I think we're ready to get started then. My name is Kara Pratt. I'm the City of Evanston's Sustainability and Resilience Manager. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to learn more about the City of Evanston's benchmarking program. I also want to express my gratitude to our partners at Clearly Energy, Slipstream, MIA, and the Illinois Green Alliance for putting this webinar together. They will each introduce themselves later in the presentation. Next slide, please. That's exactly what I did. Great, so I'll go through today's agenda. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end of our presentation, but feel free to put those questions in the chat throughout our presentation. And first, though the majority of our presentation will focus on the benchmarking policy, we wanted to provide a brief update on the new Healthy Buildings Ordinance. That will be followed by a benchmarking policy overview and the compliance process, where we'll introduce our new BEAM tool with live demos and then go through some resources and support. Next slide, please. So for those of you who haven't heard of the Healthy Buildings Ordinance, it just passed on March 10th, and it's a building performance standard that requires buildings over 20,000 square feet to meet 3 performance standards by 2050. Or if a building can't meet those standards, they can apply for alternative compliance. So first of those standards is improved energy efficiency as measured by maximum normalized site energy use intensity. Next is zero normalized on-site and district thermal greenhouse gas emissions, or no combustion of fossil fuels on-site. And third is 100% of electricity usage sourced through renewable electricity, either on-site or off-site, all by 2050. The ordinance also creates 2 new public bodies empowered to establish interim performance metrics for every 5-year period until 2050, and to establish a rulemaking process for that alternative compliance process. Speaking of those public bodies, please consider applying to serve on them. Next slide, please. So those 2 new public bodies are the Healthy Buildings Technical Committee and the Healthy Buildings Accountability Board. So especially if anyone on this webinar is connected to the Building Owners and Managers Association, the Chicagoland Apartment Association, or the Neighborhood Building Owners Alliance, we ask that you consider applying to serve on these boards, as those 3 bodies have a special nominating power codified in our ordinance. So the Healthy Buildings Technical Committee consists of 6 members, 3 of whom must be Evanston residents, 1 each from those aforementioned public bodies. And the expertise that we're looking for is expertise in utilities, district systems, HVAC, engineering, building energy systems broadly, retrocommissioning, and energy management. We expect that that committee meets twice per month for about a year as they develop the rules for this ordinance. And that committee feeds into the Healthy Buildings Accountability Board. So there is some crossover of membership. 9 total members on the Accountability Board, 5 of whom must be Evanston residents, and 3, if they're interested, from that technical committee. So in addition to those aforementioned expertises, we would also look into people who have knowledge on racial and social equity, housing, affordability, environmental justice, and climate action. That board is a permanent board of the City of Evanston. We would anticipate that they would meet once per month for 3-year terms. We've got a QR code here if you're interested in learning more about applying, and please consider applying as soon as possible, as those are mayor appointed positions, and we anticipate that the mayor would appoint all of those folks at once. So now on my last slide, I wanted to give some information on how to start preparing for the Healthy Building Ordinance compliance. Though importantly, absent any rules at this time or any interim performance standards, there's nothing currently required for HBO compliance. However, I do broadly recommend researching, baselining, and auditing as helpful first steps to prepare for compliance. So first, I would encourage you all to read the ordinance, familiarize yourself with the resources that my colleagues will be sharing later on in our presentation from the BEAM knowledge base and the Building Energy Hub. And then next, start thinking about your baseline year. Per the new ordinance, that baseline year can be your first benchmarking year with verified data, or another year that might make sense for your property. So please start thinking about that. And last, consider requesting a free ComEd facility assessment if applicable to your property, or conduct some other energy audit just to get the process started. And now I'll pass the mic over to Sarah Wells from Slipstream.
Thanks, Kara. All right, so my name is Sarah Wells. I'm a community decarbonization researcher with Slipstream. Slipstream is a nonprofit with a mission to accelerate climate solutions for everybody. And we work on research programs, financing, education, and training. I'll provide some more background information on the benchmarking policy and what is needed for building owners to comply. So the Energy and Water Benchmarking Ordinance was approved by the Evanston City Council in 2016 and requires large buildings in Evanston to track and report their yearly energy and water consumption to the city by June 30th of every year. I'll also note that given the recent adoption of the HBO in March of this year, there have been some adjustments to the benchmarking requirements, such as some new buildings that will now be exempt, which I'll come back to that shortly. As a reminder of the purpose of this ordinance, with buildings making up about 80% of Evanston's emissions, cutting energy use from this sector is key to reaching the goals outlined in Evanston's Climate Action and Resilience Plan. And benchmarking gives building owners and the city the data needed to identify opportunities for improvement and make real progress towards a carbon neutral Evanston by 2050. So who is covered by this ordinance? Buildings with gross floor areas over 20,000 square feet and condos over 50,000 square feet are required to comply with the benchmarking policy. And as you can see on the map, this covers buildings within each of Evanston's wards. For a quick snapshot of last year's reporting season, there was a 72% submission rate, which is great, but we're hoping to see improved compliance this year as well. Cool. So next I'll go over buildings that are exempt from the ordinance as of the most recent language passed through the HBO. So under the city code, smaller condo buildings under 50,000 square feet and co-ops do not need to benchmark. There are also exemptions for buildings facing financial distress, like if they're on the tax lien list, under court control, or in mortgage default. New construction is exempt as well if it wasn't fully occupied for the 12 months before the June 30th compliance deadline. And then finally, properties with demolition permits, federal buildings, and some individually owned and sub-metered units may also qualify for exemptions depending on the situation. If you have any questions about exemptions, you can email them to benchmarking@cityofevanston.org, and we'll have that email listed at the end of the presentation for your reference. Or if you'd like to request an exemption, you can also fill out a form on the BEAM knowledge base. And I believe Naomi will be showing you how to access that form in just a few minutes. So I'll quickly go through the steps needed to comply with the benchmarking policy. So you can find all of these steps listed out on the BEAM knowledge base as well. But the first step is going to be to locate your Evanston building ID attached to your building if you have not already done so. That's going to be really important to include in your data submission so we know whether your building has reported their data or not. We also have a form that you can use to update your contact information with the city. And that's going to be important so the city can reach out to you regarding your compliance status and also with sharing like future updates, such as any changes that might arise through the Healthy Buildings Ordinance rulemaking process. And like I mentioned before, you can also here submit an exemption request form if you believe your building will qualify for that. The second step is going to be to add your energy and water consumption data to Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And if you haven't already created a Portfolio Manager account and set up your property, you'll need to do that as well before entering data. The knowledge base has detailed instructions on how to do this if you need guidance. And then lastly, once your data has been entered into Portfolio Manager, you'll need to submit it to the city to be compliant with the policy. One really important thing to note here is that the process for submitting data to the city is different this year than it has been in past years. And so previously, the city has been providing a data request link each year that's used to transfer your data from Portfolio Manager over to the city. This year, the city will no longer be using a data request link, but will instead be switching to sharing that data via a web services connection, still in Portfolio Manager. The Beam knowledge base does outline this process in detail, but essentially what you'll be doing is needing to add the city of Evanston as a contact in your Portfolio Manager account. The city will then accept your connection request, like a friend request, and then you'll need to go and share your property with the city. And unlike in previous years, this is a one-time connection process. So once you complete these steps for your property one time, like this year, you won't need to do it again in future years. And so this should really help streamline that reporting process for everybody moving forward. One more thing to note here is that in the past, and as we'll be continuing in time in the future, the city has required that benchmarking data be verified by a certified professional every 3 years. And this process is on pause for the 2025 reporting period. So this year, just because data verification requirements are going to be changing with the transition to the HBO. So stay tuned on updates for that process moving forward. Data verification will be returning, but for now, there's no need to worry about that for this reporting season. And then finally, confirming compliance. So once you've submitted your data to the city, you can expect to receive an email notice within 1 to 3 business days, either confirming that your property is in compliance with the policy and that you're good to go, or you'll receive a notice telling you that there are some issues with your data quality and there might be some changes that you're going to have to make to comply. And I think that covers that. And now I'll pass things off to Naomi.
Hi, everybody. My name is Naomi Watson, and I am an analyst here from Clearly Energy. We host the Beam platform, which we've mentioned a couple times now, but we wanted to just take a minute to introduce you to the platform and what it is, what it's used for, and what interaction with it will look like from your end. So the Beam platform, also known as the Building Energy Analysis Manager, is a software platform that's used by cities and states all across the country to implement both building efficiency and decarbonization policies. So primarily benchmarking and building performance standards like HBO that we have here in Evanston. So the city has adopted Beam, and staff will be using it to compile and review data, as well as to coordinate with building owners starting in the current compliance season. As building owners on the building owner side, you can expect to interact with the platform via the knowledge base, which I'll show in a bit, through forms, through a map, the help desk, all of which I'll talk through a little bit more soon. But there are also a couple of additional Beam features and resources for building owners that are not quite launched yet, but you can expect to access in future compliance seasons. So, for example, the Beam Building Owner Portal, where you will in the future be able to see past communications, form submissions, check your live compliance status, and view any data quality issues with your submission and more. Specifically, as well as some HBO related tools and ways to submit and coordinate for the Healthy Buildings Ordinance in the future. I think one really common question I always get is whether Beam is replacing Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And the answer is no, building owners will continue to enter data into Portfolio Manager as they have in the past. The only real difference on your end is just sort of the resources and support that's available, and then also the data sharing process that Sarah mentioned. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Great. So now that we've kind of talked through the compliance process, we're going to cover some of your options for getting help and answering questions when needed. And I'll first start by describing some of your support options, and then I'll share my screen and do a live demonstration so you can see and familiarize yourself with what some of them look like. But your first stop is going to be the knowledge base when you have a question. And this is a resource hub. It's a public website with all of the most up-to-date information and tools that you will need to understand and comply with benchmarking, and then also with HBO in the future. This website is totally public, so you don't need any sort of login information to access the information and resources on there. And the site will also continually be updated with additional guidance as it's developed. The next thing I want to point out are forms, which you can access through this program's knowledge base. Right now, I'll show you in a minute, you can see a form to update your contact information, to submit an exemption request or a general inquiry. And then finally, there's the help desk. So if you would like to talk to a staff member, you have a question, or would like to discuss something, you can send us an email at the email on the screen, benchmarking@cityofevanston.org, or you can also submit a general inquiry form through the knowledge base. And a really quick note about the difference between these two. They're quite similar. General inquiries kind of look a little bit more like a form, and they're a little bit easier for us to process internally, but they kind of all land in the same place, and you're going to get a response back in your regular email address in about the same amount of time. So it's really completely up to you and whatever is going to be handiest for you to get in touch with us. And then finally, we have Katie from the Green Building Alliance here on the call, and she's going to talk in a little bit about the wonderful resources and opportunities for additional support as well as one-on-one guidance through their Building Energy Hub. But first, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to do a couple of live demos so you can see what we're talking about. So Sarah, if you could stop sharing your screen, and I'll go ahead and share mine. Great. Can everyone see that all right?
We can see it.
Awesome. Great. So first, we're going to talk about the knowledge base. And I just want to point out where a couple of key resources are located and kind of orient you to what we're looking at here. When you first log on to the knowledge base, you'll see everything organized into categories. So, we have things about announcements and events. The webinar is posted on here that you all are attending today. We have kind of about the ordinance and more information, as well as down here, a step-by-step process for compliance. So I highly recommend going in here and poking around to get a sense of where everything is located. Again, this will be updated over time as additional information is published. But the couple things I wanted to point out are, number one, where the covered buildings list is located. So here, if you go to About the Benchmarking Ordinance, and then click on Which Buildings Must Report Covered Buildings List, you'll find the link to the 2024 Covered Buildings List, as well as the interactive map, where you can see where those buildings are physically located. So this is where you can find, the link to the exemption request, but if you need a refresher on what your Evanston building ID is, this is the page you'll want to visit. The second resource I want to do a special shout out of is this benchmarking compliance process section. If you click on the blue button down here, you'll find step-by-step guidance on how to comply. This is basically everything that Sarah just talked about. So everything from updating your contact information to how to benchmark and set up a portfolio manager account if you haven't already. And then I want to click in here to this step 3, report your data section. So this is where we have all of the detailed instructions on how to connect and share your information with the city of Evanston via this new web services process. And if you're curious kind of like why the city has chosen to do this, whereas previously building owners would submit to a data request link and respond, and any sort of updates or updates to their data would require that a building owner resubmit that link. When you go through this portfolio manager web services process, you'll just do this all of these sharing steps one time. And then in future years, you won't really have to do anything additional other than just enter your data. If you find that you have updates to your data, you just kind of make the change in portfolio manager, and the city will be able to access that information within about 24 to 48 hours. So it's much more of like a live update process. And so we appreciate you all working with us to go through these sharing steps one time, but hopefully in future years it will streamline things a bit. The third resources I wanted to take a second to shout out are these 2 sections here about the Healthy Buildings Ordinance and building performance resources. As Kara mentioned, again, we want to emphasize there's no current requirements, but if you'd like to start learning about the ordinance and thinking through future compliance and how it might impact you, this is a great place to start. So next, I'm going to show you all how to access forms. So if you're on the main page of the knowledge base, or if you've already clicked in and you're reading about information in a certain section, you'll still always see this new ticket button here on the left-hand side of your screen. You can click on that button and you'll see a drop-down list of all of the form options that you have to fill out. Right now there are only 3, but these options will likely expand in future years when we ask you all to submit information regarding HBO. So for right now, you can just click on whichever option you'd like to fill out. You'll see, some of the fields are required, which you'll see with this little red asterisk, and some are optional. So just fill out whatever is required and whatever other additional information you'd like to provide for us. We will usually ask you to provide your Evanston building ID on forms, as well as your submitter email. Quick note to just take a quick double check that you type in this email correctly, because if you make a typo, it's really tough for us to get back in touch and find you and respond to your ticket or question. Once you're finished filling out the form, you click Submit Ticket, and you can expect to receive a confirmation in your email inbox just saying, hey, thanks so much for submitting this. We received it, and we'll get back to you with any questions or follow-up that we have. Great. So that's the knowledge base. Happy to answer any questions about that at the end. But now I'm going to flip over and do a live demo of how to connect and share through this new web services process on Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Great. So you're going to want to start by just logging in to your Portfolio Manager account. And then you're going to want to check to see that you've entered your Evanston building ID. And this is quite important this year, maybe more so than it has in the past year, because we can't accept your submission through web services without that ID being entered. So to double check that it's entered, you can navigate to your property in Portfolio Manager and click into it. Go to the Details tab here. Scroll down to the Unique Identifiers section. And under Standard IDs, you should see Evanston Building ID with your Evanston Building ID listed here under City and Town. If you do not see it, you can click on Edit. Scroll down here to the Standard ID, City/Town section, and select Evanston Building ID from the drop-down menu. There's quite a lot of options, but I believe they're alphabetized, so it should not be too hard to find. And then you can enter your ID in the text box right here. Just remember to click save if you make any changes. Great. So now that you've double checked that your property or properties have their Evanston building IDs entered, we're going to start by connecting your account. So as Sarah mentioned, you can think of it as like sending a friend request on ESPN. Start by clicking on contacts here in the upper right-hand corner, and then add new contacts / connections. You're going to use the username section to type in City of Evanston IL. Again, we'll make sure that you have access to this recording, and this is also listed on the knowledge base, so you know what to search. There should just be one option that pops up. It should say Office of Sustainability, and then that same exact username you just typed in. And I've already connected with the city, but for you, you'll see kind of like a blue button here that says Connect. So click on that button, and that will complete part 1 of the sharing process. So once the city accepts your friend request on Portfolio Manager, you'll receive an email titled Account Share Accepted to your Portfolio Manager, the data administrator email related to your Portfolio Manager account. And this email will prompt you that it's time to move on to part 2 of sharing your property, and it will contain the exact same written instructions that both are on the knowledge base and that I'm about to share through this demo. So you're going to want to start by going to the Sharing tab. Click on Share or Edit Access to a Property, and then go in and select your properties. A couple of notes here: if you have multiple buildings that you'd like to share with the city that need to comply, please, you're welcome to select more than one at one time. You can use the search bar up here to help you find them. And then you also, if you're sharing a campus, you're going to want to share both the parent and child properties. So both the main campus as well as all of the individual buildings. And when you've selected everything, click Apply Selection. Here for step 2, under Select People Accounts, you're going to want to find that Office of Sustainability City of Evanston IL that you just connected with. Select it, and under Permissions, choose Personalized Sharing and Exchange Data, and click Continue. Great. So now that we're on this page, you're going to want to click Exchange Data. You're going to get a pop-up window here. You can basically select read-only access for most everything. We don't need editing access to your data. We just want to be able to see it. For recognition, you can select None. And for Share Forward, you can select No. Finally, click Apply Selections and Authorize Exchange, and then click Share Properties. After you finalize and click Share Properties, you're going to receive a confirmation email. So once the property share request has been accepted, this will verify that the city has received your data, and you do not need to submit any kind of data request or respond to any kind of data request link in addition, as you have in past years. I will note that, as Sarah mentioned, this doesn't necessarily mean that the city has reviewed your data. So that email will just confirm that we got it. And then there will be another email that comes a couple of days later that basically says, we've reviewed your data. Thank you so much for submitting. You're in compliance. Or if there are specific data quality issues that we've identified, it'll say exactly what those issues are, along with instructions on how to fix them. And when you receive those emails, you're welcome to reach out to the help desk if you have additional questions or whatnot. Again, we know this is a new process, so please reach out to the help desk if you have any questions or run into any problems whatsoever. And we're going to go back to the slides so I can pass it over to Katie to talk about additional support options.
Thanks, Naomi. As Sarah is pulling up the slide deck again, I just wanted to say that Naomi did a really great job going through those steps, because there's a lot of things like specific things to go through to make sure you have everything clicked correctly. So thank you for making such a thorough resource in the knowledge base. And I'm going to talk a little bit about other resources that you can access if you're having trouble, but also just some of the things that as you're thinking forward about the energy efficiency and decarbonization or planning for your property, some of the things that the Building Energy Hub has to offer. So the Building Energy Hub is a project of Illinois Green Alliance, along with a number of partners. We have been putting together some really great resources for buildings across the state of Illinois to help you on your energy efficiency and decarbonization journey, kind of curating some of the best resources from a lot of different people's websites, as well as making some of our own to fill some gaps as well. I've included a few on the slide here that I thought would be most interesting to folks on the call. One is our getting started resources, our energy efficiency checklist to think through things that you may have done at your property already and things that you might want to look at in the future. We also have a really great operations and maintenance guide for operations and maintenance staff to take a look and see if some of these practices will help with some low and no cost adjustments to your building to save some energy and resources. And then the newest resource we have here is the Building Performance Planning Guide. Some of you might, as Kara and Sarah mentioned earlier, the HBO does not have requirements or rules out yet, but some of you might have equipment that's up for replacement in the coming years, and you might want to think about what your replacement options look like, what are some different funding and financing strategies to look at that are available right now. So this is a really great guide to start thinking forward in your capital planning process and what investments you might be thinking about in the future for your building around energy. And then finally, a funding and financing guide that talks about all the different funding, financing, grants, and resources, rebates that are available in Illinois right now for different buildings and property types. So definitely take a look at these resources if you're thinking about making some improvements to your building in the future. Heather just put the link in the chat if you want to start exploring those before you get the follow-up email. I have one more slide, but start putting some Q&A in the chat because we're going to take questions next. Finally, we have some education and support as well. This coming Friday, the Building Energy Hub has our Finance Fridays webinar, and it's about the Illinois Climate Bank's new Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund. So it might be worth checking out to see if your building or future project might qualify for the use of this new fund available with the state of Illinois. We also have a webinar next week about decarbonization strategies for existing buildings. It's really a 101 class to try and think through some of the initial planning processes to consider for your building. We also have a lot of on-demand energy and finance sessions from previously recorded, including a benchmarking 101 that might be useful as you're starting your process here. And then finally, we have a new offering that we're working with the city of Evanston on, 30-minute technical assistance sessions. So you can book with me directly, 30 minutes of my time, and you can share your screen. I can share my screen. We can work through any problems that you might have. Obviously, there's the resources that Naomi and Sarah shared on the knowledge base, the general inquiry, submitting a ticket. But if you need someone to walk through one-on-one, I'm happy to be here to help, even through things like sharing, the sharing process Naomi went through if you get stuck on that process and want some assistance, anything with your utility data collection or connection to your accounts, connecting to ComEd or connecting ComEd data to your portfolio manager account. All of those are some of my favorite things to help with, so I'd be happy to help you if you're having trouble with any of those processes. I think that's it for me. I hope that you guys will take advantage of some of these resources. I think we all are trying to work as hard as we can to help everyone get through this process, understand their options, and make sure that you don't have any confusion along the way. So we're excited to work with you. I'm going to turn it back to Sarah to see if there's any questions in the chat.
Thanks so much, Katie. And yeah, thank you all for attending and listening and putting your questions in the chat. We're starting to see some roll through, so we'll get to that in a second. But before I do, just want to again mention to please send your inquiries to the benchmarking@cityofevanston.org email, or you can submit a ticket through the Beam knowledge base. We'll either way, we'll be able to get it and help you out. And we'll also, just as a reminder, be sending out the presentation and the recording for your reference as well. And then for questions related to the Building Energy Hub, Katie's email is here for you to reach out to. So, questions. I'll just kind of read them through and our team will kind of be able to jump in and answer them. So the first question I see is, if we already use Energy Star, do we need to retrieve our building ID? I don't know.
Yeah, I can take that one. So I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, I think you're talking about your portfolio manager ID. So your portfolio manager ID that's going to be associated with your property and the Evanston building ID are separate. So you will have to enter your Evanston building ID in addition to the portfolio manager property ID that is automatically assigned to your property upon setup in Portfolio Manager.
Thanks, Naomi. It looks like you answered this question in the chat, but I'll just say it out loud, just to reiterate. But if a situation arises where you already entered your benchmarking ID or your building ID in Portfolio Manager, and you shared your data, you followed all the steps correctly, and you do happen to still get an email saying that your building ID is missing, you can, and correct me if I'm wrong, Naomi, but you can most likely ignore that email as long as you know that you followed that step correctly. That's something that the Beam team is going to be working to resolve. But yeah, if you entered it correctly, you should be okay. And we've received your Claim My Building form.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think this is a temporary issue that popped up, and so we'll hopefully have it resolved in just a couple of days. So sorry about the miscommunication, but yes, you can ignore it if you have entered everything correctly.
Awesome. And then another question, again, it's answered in the chat, but I'll say it out loud. How long does it take for confirmation to be received after data is entered and shared? And like Naomi says in the chat, it really just should take, I think we said like 1 to 3 business days, but it may also be quicker than that.
Yeah, and I guess I want to clarify. So we're talking about 3 different emails here. You connect your account and you get an email within, usually a couple of days confirming that we accepted it. You share your property, and then same deal, you get an email confirming that we accepted your property within a few days. And then the third email is a few days later, that is basically saying we've reviewed your data, and either thank you so much for your submitting, you're in compliance, you won't hear much from us until next year, or thank you so much for sharing, but can you please fix this specific issue? So you should be getting about 3 emails from us.
Great. Thanks, Naomi. Another question about this one is, how do you know that we are done entering data for next year? And if the web sharing services connection has already been completed this year, do we need to send anything? So I think that question is referencing, yeah, there is, since we're not using a data request link anymore and moving towards web services, which is a one-time connection, there won't be like that yearly data request link form that you would need to fill out. Naomi, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, I can take that one. So yeah, there's not really any like I hereby submit this data button anymore. So it's a good question. In future years, all that you really need to do is enter your complete data. The timeline in future years for when you get that feedback email saying, thank you for complying, or here's your feedback, might look a little bit different than it does right now in this first year. But there will not be any additional like form that you need to say, I'm ready for review. You just enter it and then we'll have it.
Awesome. And that's all the questions that I am seeing in the chat for now. Definitely feel free to add others in. Also, if you would like to come off mute and ask a question, feel free to do that as well. I'll pause for a bit and see if any more roll through.
I think I changed the settings as well. So everyone was muted when they came in. Now you can unmute and ask questions. If there's not additional questions, is there anything that you all, like if folks kind of have one takeaway from this webinar, is there anything you'd like to re-highlight or make note of as we wait for more questions to come into the chat?
I have a question, Naomi. For your notification settings in Portfolio Manager, do you have to have them set a certain way to make sure you do get those emails? So that your contact, that a contact has been received or anything like that from Beam, or you're going to get those emails no matter what?
Yeah, so you're gonna get those emails no matter what, because they're sort of not technically coming from Portfolio Manager, they're coming from Beam. So it's hopefully just 3 emails. We're not gonna like spam message you. If for some reason you're not getting those notifications within like, I don't know, 3 days to a week or whatever, maybe try checking your spam or junk folder, just to make sure. And then again, you're always welcome to write into the help desk and we can check on the status of your submission. And yes, we will be sending out like a summary email afterward with the recording, with the slides. So yes, you will have access to the recording.
Another question in the chat, if we already verified this year, will we need to verify again next year? You can take it, Kara. maybe.
Yeah, I can take that one. So with the new Healthy Buildings Ordinance, our verification process has changed. And so only the baseline year will need to be verified, as well as the data submitted for each interim performance year. So that would be 2030's data. So you would only need to verify next year if that is the year that you would like to choose for your baseline. Please let me know if that answers it or if there's any follow-ups.
Thanks, Kara. And then another question, how does one determine whether a condo is under 50,000 square feet?
That is a hard one, and I would be willing to help work with you to try to figure that out. We have a couple tools at our disposal here at the city and that we can leverage from the county. So why don't you and I connect on that one-on-one and we can figure that out together.
Yeah, feel free to write into the benchmarking@cityoфevanston.org email with that question or submit a ticket, and either way we'll be able to get in touch with you to help answer that. All right, a couple more rolling in. This is awesome. Thanks everyone for adding your questions. Does the baseline year need to be now or in the future?
So give me just a second to pull up that ordinance language because I want to give you an exact answer. And if anyone else has it pulled up and can read it quicker than me, that would be welcome.
I'll just actually follow up while you're looking for that, Kara, that we do have actually a note in the chat that's a follow-up to the question about checking for square footage. And it says one option could be to check, ask the insurance company for square footage. So maybe that would be of help for that.
That is great. Thank you so much for that. I do have this pulled up and I see another question about generally explaining the baseline year. So let me pull up how we've described this in our ordinance language. So we've defined baseline year as a 12-month period no earlier than the first verified benchmarking year selected by the city manager or the city manager's designee in collaboration with the owner of the covered property for each covered property for each performance metric. And so based on this ordinance language, that baseline year could be into the future, but keep in mind that the likely first interim performance year will be 2030 data. And so we could be getting into a window at which it would be more difficult to make any sort of improvements to meet an interim standard if that baseline year is in the future. But that's a process, once we have these public bodies established, that we'll be communicating a whole lot more about. But to reiterate, in terms of verification, there's no verification required for 2025.
Great, thanks, Kara. That we can wait another minute or two to see if more questions roll in. Definitely feel free to add them in. We still have a few minutes left scheduled, allotted for our call today. So I'll pause to see if more roll in. And again, yeah, feel free to unmute as well. Let's see, we have a question that says, could the baseline be a past year if you submit benchmarking data for the several years?
Yes, as long as the data for that year is verified data, then it could be a past year as early as 2016.
And when it comes to kind of like the nitty gritty of actually choosing your baseline, we're sort of way off from that, and we're going to have all of this whole rulemaking process. But in the future, I was saying that there'll be some additional tools in Beam and forms and stuff. So keep an eye out for that far in the future.
It sounds like Kara cut off for a second, but to clarify, that the baseline year could be as early as 2016. And another question about the baseline year, will it include all building groups?
Can you type a little bit more clarification or come off mute maybe to explain that question further? I think it was Lee.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
So will it include, buildings under 50,000, under 100,000, over 100,000? So if we verify, buildings from 2016 for our base year, do we have to do all three groups? We have, 16, 15, 16 sites. So do we have to verify all of those, or will it be one group 1 year, one group the next year? How will does that make sense?
Yeah, I can take that, Lee. So we're not breaking out verification into those building types any longer. We're only asking for verification for the interim performance year. So it would be all of the buildings for 2030's data into the future. And then similarly for the baseline, you could either choose for all of the buildings one particular verified year, or you could re-verify data for a specific year if you would like to keep all your portfolio of buildings with the same baseline. So that's the process over the next several months that we'll have to figure out with each individual covered property owner to identify what would make most sense.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. And then one other question that came in was regarding the link that we had written onto the mailer that you received. Just to clarify, it's the web address says like bit.ly. But if you were to type in that link, it actually would go to the knowledge base, even though I know it's kind of counterintuitive that it would redirect there, but it's a tool that you can use to like shorten links, so we don't have you typing in a super long URL, which could be kind of taxing. So hopefully that helps clarify that question. Will the first possible interim year be 2030, regardless of what year you choose as your baseline? And Kara answers this in the chat, but yes. And then there's another question about data verification. Do we still need to verify every 3rd year?
So that will now become every 5th year, beginning with 2030's data, with that asterisk of this baseline question that we've been discussing. So if you have a baseline year of verified data that you already are comfortable with using as your portfolio's baseline, then you don't have to verify until 2030's data. If you have a situation where you have never verified data, or you would like to set a baseline that is not with verified data, then you would have to verify for that year.
Thanks, Kara. All right, we've rolled through the questions, I believe, in the chat so far. If I've missed any, feel free to jump off mute and ask it, but I can also take another pause here to see if we have more that come through. And like Naomi said earlier, if in between, as we wait for questions, if there's any like takeaways or that you would like to kind of share, feel free to do that as well.
I'll take one. I think one takeaway from this webinar is definitely to update your contact information. In the past, the city has not necessarily collected contact info that's specifically related to buildings. So now we have your building data stored and we have your contact information stored along with it. And so that's going to allow us to reach out with a lot more specificity in terms of, hey, we're emailing you about this building with this ID. And here's the message we're emailing you about. So I think this is going to be really important as the rulemaking process continues, just because previously we've sort of only been able to email out like a general list serve or to a like portfolio manager admin email, which sometimes are more specific and sometimes not. So update your contact info so we can get in touch with you.
My takeaway is no question is a dumb question. And that's what those links are for. That's what the knowledge base is for. That's what the 30-minute sessions are for. We want to help you not be frustrated and find the answers quickly so you can move on with the process. So please reach out to us in any of the forms we provided, and we will help you out and make sure that everything makes sense and you can check it off your list.
That's a great one, Katie. Yes, definitely reach out with your questions. We can help with anything you have in your mind. Is the 20,000 square feet figure based on total or gross square footage? I believe it. Yeah, I believe it's gross square feet. I don't know if one of you wants to clarify. But yeah. Alrighty. We can hang for another minute or two if there's more questions. It's kind of slowed down a little bit. Right. Okay. If there's no more questions, I think maybe we can wrap up for the afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining. It was really great to hear all of your questions. We have a question. I'm going to pause on my wrap up here. For condos under the square foot requirements that have reported in the past, do they have to file an exemption?
That would be helpful unless you already have an email from the city that confirms that you are exempt.
Great. If there's no more questions, maybe we can wrap up. Thank you all so much for joining and for adding in your questions. Again, send us your addition if you forgot, if it didn't come to mind now and you have a question later, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd love to help you out. But for now, Yeah, thanks for joining. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.